should we actually be moving towards living in woodlands? In one of our most recent videos, we posed a fairly simple question. Can you live in woodland? And we were amazed at how that video blew up. The number of comments we found that were being placed on the video, the questions, and judging by the response, quite a lot of you had some very strong opinions about the answer. Some of you thought it was absolutely ridiculous that you can own a piece of land and still not necessarily be allowed to live on it. And we do completely understand that argument. Do not make the mistake that we don't understand. If you've bought the land, why shouldn't you be able to do what you want with it? So we responded to some of the questions, and then we started thinking around the subject and the other things associated with it. The main question is, should we actually be living in woodlands at all? Not can we, not are we legally allowed to, but should we? There's a much bigger question hiding underneath all of this. And it is, and we don't know the answer to this, so we're looking for your opinions, your comments, what people genuinely think. How much human activity can a woodland actually absorb before it stops becoming the woodland that we're trying to protect, or a woodland that we should protect? The comments on the original video, I'll pop it on the screen so you can see which one it is, were absolutely fascinating. There were people saying it's your land, do what you want with it. They were suggesting certain legal ways of being allowed to do that, which we do intend to look into, and I can see the logic. If you own something, you naturally feel that you've got some control of it. But the question is here, is woodland different? Maybe when you buy a woodland, you're not really buying an empty piece of land. Are you actually buying an ecosystem? Does that ecosystem contain things that don't belong to us? The trees, the plants, the fungi, the insects, the birds, the mammals, and obviously an enormous number of creatures that we probably never even see. So I want to know what you think. Where do our rights end and where do their rights begin? Now, obviously humans have lived alongside woodland for thousands of years. And humans don't automatically destroy woodland simply by being there. In fact, managed woodland can be incredibly valuable for wildlife, and we do believe this. The problem isn't necessarily one person being in a woodland, it's what that person brings with them, what they take away, what they leave behind. First example is something as basic as going to the toilet. If you live somewhere permanently, you're going to produce waste. And if you simply put a toilet in the woods and allow everything to soak into the ground, maybe you dig a hole, do your business, cover it up, that isn't harmless. There are nutrients, there are pathogens involved, maybe you're on antibiotics, maybe you're on medication, potentially that's going to contaminate the soil and the water. However, there is another side to this. We have the technology now that allows us to deal with human waste very differently. A properly designed and managed compost toilet can dramatically reduce the environmental impact. So this is where we think the argument really genuinely gets interesting, because the question isn't necessarily do humans cause damage? Of course we do. The question is, can we reduce that damage enough to make our presence actually compatible with the ecosystem? And that's a very different question. Then another example, we have water. If you live somewhere, you need it. Drinking, washing, cleaning, cooking. And suddenly then a woodland isn't just somewhere that you're visiting. You're creating this little human infrastructure. But again, there are ways of reducing the impact. Rainwater collection, which we do, using water carefully, which we also do, keeping the wastewater away from streams, ponds, things like that, and simply understanding where that water is going. And none of that makes us impact free, but maybe that's the point. Maybe we can never, as humans, be zero impact, but maybe could we aim for a responsible impact? Another thing is fire, light, noise, things that seem completely harmless to us in our day-to-day lives. A vehicle, music, people talking, dogs running around. To us, they're just part of everyday life. But to wildlife, can they change the environment? Examples are a woodland that's normally dark at night suddenly becomes illuminated, a quiet area becomes noisy, children, adults having fun, a path that was just only maybe occasionally used becomes a regular route. Base camp that was previously untouched, we now use as our main point when we're spending time in the woodland. Suddenly that wildlife has to adapt. And that raises another maybe uncomfortable question. Does wildlife have to adapt to us simply because we own the land? I think perhaps the most important thing here is scale. One person occasionally visiting a woodland is one thing. One person permanently living there is maybe another thing. A family is different to that. But then imagine 10 houses, 20 houses, a road, parking, electricity, the water infrastructure, the sewerage, fences, outbuildings. And then are we then still talking about a woodland, or are we talking about a settlement inside a woodland? We don't know, as woodland owners making this video, where that line is drawn. We genuinely don't know, and we're asking you, what are your thoughts on this? Is that one of the reasons the planning rules exist? We think, yes, we do think that. We do understand that planning is there for a reason. But then that leads on to, are they just trying to control us? Does the government actually think that woodland owners shouldn't be allowed to enjoy their land? And do individual decisions have some kind of cumulative effect? And I think this is where it becomes even more complex, because humans aren't always the problem. Sometimes we are the solution. We manage this woodland. We are encouraging native species. We are creating habitat. We're creating deadwood. We've got the fallen timber, the standing trees. We're planning the bigger pond. We allow areas to become untidy. Areas that look neglected are actually deliberate. For example, you know, the ring-barked poplar that we've mentioned in other videos. That's exactly the point. If someone just looked at our woodland and said humans shouldn't interfere, just leave it completely alone, we actually do disagree with that, because sometimes doing nothing isn't necessarily the best thing for biodiversity either. So that leads into, should we just leave woodland wild? And this is where I'd really, really like to know what you think. Should woodlands simply be left alone? Should we minimise human interference as much as possible? Or if we own it, do we actually have a responsibility to be there, physically stay over to manage it? And what about living in it? Could we protect it even more if we actually lived in it? If someone could truly demonstrate that they could live in a woodland without causing significant ecological damage, would you have a problem with that? Because that's where the debate starts. Do you think that humans should, they have the right as the apex species to claim that land and do as we please with it? I mean, humans, arguably, we are the apex species. We've built cities, we've transformed landscapes. We've farmed enormous areas of the planet to feed ourselves, and we've created technology, like I said, that allows us to actually survive in places where we otherwise maybe couldn't. So perhaps it's natural that we see land and think, I can use this. But is being capable of doing something, does that actually mean that we should? So if we had an absolutely top of the range base camp setup, used the same footprint, and then actually transformed that into a living area. So we actually, decided to live there. We disposed of our waste, in a responsible fashion. We had a proper high-end techie compost toilet. We remained in base camp. We didn't have any lights on at night, and we didn't bring a car into the woodland. Or should we be allowed to do all of that? So we would both be really, really interested in what you think on this. So we would like you to comment, tell us, what would you do with a woodland if you bought one? If you're planning on buying a woodland, what are your intentions with that land? Do you think overall, as humans, we should be moving further towards living in woodlands, and returning to a more basic, less impactful way of life, living alongside the wildlife, allowing it to adapt to us so that we can benefit, but also then reducing maybe our carbon footprint, reducing the toxicity that we put into the environment in the regular residential properties that we live in, less consumption of non-renewables, fossil fuels, the gas, the coal. Should we be living in woodlands to care for them, to provide our own fuel? We grow the trees, we care for them. Do we then have a right to use those trees as fuel to heat ourselves, our water, cook our food? And then, that moves into the helping the wildlife even more. If we lived in woodlands, would we actually be helping them? So I'd be really interested to know what you think. We will try to respond to all comments, but like with the previous Can You Live Here video, it did get a bit crazy, and I apologise to anybody who watched that who commented that we didn't actually reply to your comment, because we do value all the comments. So again, thank you for watching. We're going to be back soon with more videos as well, but just let us know what you think.